Nasha relaxed in her hammock, suspended between two branches of the bellnet tree she called home. The thin, spiny leaves of the tree's canopy were strong and fibrous and proved a perfect material to braid into the strand-like robes that held her aloft her hammock. And there she lay, swinging gently in the cool morning breeze, perched some 25 feet above the rubble-strewn surface below, her face covered by a broad-brimmed hat as she slumbered. Of all the places in the diaspora that her parents could have been sent by the URA, she was relieved it was Onov. The planet was old to be sure, but it was far more open and expansive in its reach than the cramped, overcrowded confines of the Bridgehead station in orbit of lost Earth. The air was clean and fresh, the sky a vibrant lazulene, and the sun rays bathed her in a warm auburn light. It was everything a young woman needed to thrive and survive in a post-Earth universe. She was momentarily roused from her slumber by a crunching and grinding sound from the ground outside her hut. Lifting her hat from her face to reveal her olive skin, almond-shaped hazel eyes, and long black hair, Nasha sat up in her hammock, her feet gently landing on the creaking but sturdy wooden floor of her treehouse home. When the scatterpods had landed on Onov, the flat, endless, broken lands of the world appeared safe, but appearances were deceiving. The ground was unstable, and people soon began to sink into the rubble pits like quicksand, eventually crushed under the weight of the stone and rock. Those that survived had scrambled haphazardly atop the slowly sinking pods, hoping to delay the apparent inevitability of their demise. It was the first of a series of calamities that plagued the early settlers and colonists of Onov. The rubble proved a vast, gray ocean of danger, with its unstable surface the least of concerns. Pit vipers, fling bats, and the occasional stampede of the various broad-footed herd beasts caused no end of harm and strife. And then, there were the survivors of the Wave 1 scatterpods that had preceded the colonists. Those whose occupants had succumbed to the FTL sickness, the malady, and had been driven into violent and frenzied rage. Swarms of crazed attackers tormented the early settlers, dwindling their numbers and pushing the colonization of Onov to the brink of collapse and failure. But like so many settlements around the diaspora, Nasha's parents and many more like them proved the resilience of humanity and had withstood the torturous tests of a malevolent universe. They found refugees, like the bellnet trees, in which they had constructed their treehouse home. And soon, they would start to receive the productive bounty of the URA in their modular mining and fabrication machine units, and would tame Onov, a dangerous world, but beautiful as well, livable. As Nasha leaned out her window, she saw the movement and stirring of the rubble below, a shifting of stone that was the telltale sign of pit vipers. The serpentine monstrosities were ubiquitous in the rubble pits, and were a commonly, albeit dangerous, fauna found in and around clutches of bellnet trees that anchored some of the more stable regions of the ruined surface. But the movement wasn't just at the base of her trees. As she glanced up over the rubble field, the vast broken plain that extended miles in every direction, there was movement as far as she could see. Not just this nest of vipers, but dozens, maybe hundreds of them, and all of them were moving away, fleeting from a central point, no more than 500 feet to the south of her tree clutch. Nasha turned her head to the right, seeing the older couple in the tree next to hers, who were also looking at the rubble sea and the movement of the pit vipers. She saw the older woman point out into the rubble sea, in the general direction from which the vipers were fleeing. Nasha saw something strange. In the seemingly endless flat plains of the broken rubble seas, there were few changes in topography. But Nasha swore she could see what looked like a bulge in the field, rising slowly, but steadily into the air above the flat horizon of stone and rock. Then suddenly, she realized what it was and screamed over to her neighbor. "Baro-blast!" Barometric. Within moments of the bubble of rock and stone expanded out to almost 120 feet high before instantly collapsing down back with tremendous force. The ensuing decompressive explosion from the pocket of unstable subsurface pressure was tremendous. Nasha was instantly thrown back from the window by the shock as the entire field before her was replaced by a massive crater. Stone and rock, some as small as pebbles, others as large as a fist, were propelled into the sky and struck into the homes of the bellnet tree clusters like grape shot, eviscerating the wooden structures and those inside. As the deafening roar of the explosion subsided, replaced with the almost rhythmic sound of stones and pebbles peppering the roof of her treehouse, just like the stories of the ice rain of old Earth she had heard as a child. But beyond all that she could hear were screams. The pain-filled and blood-gurgling screams of anguish and terror of her neighbors and the other 200 members of her tree clutch community. Nasha righted herself, pushing herself up into a seating position, glancing at her legs. That when she saw the real damage done by the explosion. Dozens of small, gnarled-looking contusions and wounds across her bare legs. Viscous ichor oozing from the wounds onto the shattered wooden floor beneath her. With this realization of her injury, a wave of intense, blinding pain enveloped her mind as she grasped at her legs and cried out. And then the wave hit. A slow-moving wave of energy from the baro-blast was passing through the deep compacted layer of rubble that sat atop of the bedrock on the surface of the planet and reached clutch of the bellnet trees that provided refuge to the small community. Tectonic instability was not uncommon, and usually, the large bulbous weight of rock and stone that the trees used to anchor themselves in an enclosed bell of their roots was enough to maintain their sturdiness. But not this time, and soon the trees of the clutch began to tip and falter. Nasha felt her home move as the tree began to fall, with the weight of her small treehouse perched in the net-shaped branches accelerating its collapse. In what felt agonizingly slow, Nasha began to slide across the blood-slick floor of her home as the tree toppled and smashing the remnants of her abode into the fractious and unstable surface below. As she came to rest on the rubble, still bleeding and injured, adrenaline coursed through her veins in response to the enormity of the calamity. She took a moment to center herself, breathing in deeply, attempting to push past the incredible pain, the shock and the fear of the disaster that had befallen her. Her tranquil and peaceful life had been shattered in a moment of explosive destruction. But despite this, she couldn't help but let out a throaty chuckle, a release of primal tension. She had survived against all odds. She had weathered disaster. But as the rock and stone of the rubble pits began to subside from the shock wave of the decompressive explosion and settle once more, the surface was not still for long. The signs of movement, the shifting and grinding of stone returned as the pit vipers, which only a moment earlier had fled the impending baro-blast, now returned. The stone surrounding the clutch of bellnet trees was coated with the iron-rich blood of people, humans, aliens to this world, and the vipers were hungry.